A millionaire used to dining alone suddenly notices someone familiar across the room, his ex, accompanied by 3 identical children. His heart races, questions flood his mind, but nothing prepares him for what happens next. Stay tuned, because his reaction might just change everything. The soft hum of conversation filled the air of the upscale restaurant, an orchestra of laughter, whispered confessions, and clinking glasses. Ethan Callahan sat alone at his table, swirling the amber liquid in his glass as the ice cubes slowly melted into the rich depths of his whiskey. He was not a man prone to nostalgia, nor one who indulged in sentimentality. Emotions were distractions, unpredictable elements that he had long since eradicated from his carefully curated life. His empire was built on precision and unwavering control. Every deal, every acquisition, every move was planned to perfection. But fate, as it turned out, had never been part of his calculations. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows against the polished mahogany walls. As Ethan lifted the glass to his lips, his gaze landed on a vision from the past across the room. Seated at a table with an easy grace that had once haunted his dreams was Mia Thompson. Her laughter, warm and genuine, curled through the air like an intoxicating melody. But it was not just Mia who held him captive. Seated beside her were 3 small figures, 2 identical boys and a little girl, their eyes bright with mischief, their features eerily familiar. Ethan's grip tightened around the glass, his pulse a deafening drum against his ribs. The boys were mirror images of himself at that age, sharing his sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes that had once stared back at him from old family portraits. The little girl, delicate yet fierce in the way she held herself, had Mia's fiery determination written all over her. A wave of realization crashed over him, brutal and inescapable. These were not just any children. They were his, and he had never known they existed. The restaurant, once a haven of predictability, now felt suffocating. Ethan set his glass down with a quiet thud, his mind spinning with questions. 3 years since Mia had walked out of his life, severing the last frayed thread of what they had been. He had told himself he had moved on, that whatever emotions he had once harbored for her had been buried beneath the weight of ambition. But now, as he watched her tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear and saw the way her fingers rested protectively on the back of one of the boys, the past clawed its way to the surface. He had to move. He had to act. The questions burned, igniting something dangerous inside him. Rising to his feet, he cut across the restaurant, ignoring the murmured conversations and curious glances from the other diners. His focus was singular, unrelenting. With every step, the reality of what had been stolen from him grew heavier. Mia looked up just as he reached the table. Her smile faded into something unreadable, but it was her eyes, wide, startled, filled with unspoken truths that told him everything he needed to know. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The children, oblivious to the storm brewing between the adults, chatted amongst themselves, their small hands playing with the silverware. Ethan swallowed hard. His voice was barely above a whisper when he finally spoke. "Are they mine?" The words hung between them like a live wire, charged with years of absence, regret, and things left unsaid. Mia's lips parted, and for a fleeting second, Ethan saw something raw flicker in her expression. Guilt, fear, and then, with a quiet breath, she nodded. "Yes, Ethan, they're yours." The world tilted, the ground vanishing beneath his feet. 3 years, 3 children, 3 lives he had unknowingly abandoned. His heart pounded, his mind raced to catch up with the brutal truth before him. His entire life had been built on power and dominance, on ensuring that nothing ever happened beyond his control. But this shattered everything. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Callahan had no idea what to do next. The silence stretched between them, a gaping void filled with words neither knew how to say. Ethan stood rigid, every muscle in his body coiled tight, his mind a battlefield of anger, confusion, and an aching sense of loss. Mia met his gaze, her own eyes weary but steady. She had always been like that, unshaken even when faced with the storm that was Ethan Callahan. His hands curled into fists at his sides as he forced himself to breathe. 3 years, Mia, he said in a low, dangerous tone. 3 years, and you never told me. She exhaled slowly, the weight of her decision evident in the slump of her shoulders. I tried, she whispered. I called, I left messages, but you never answered. Ethan felt a sharp pang. He had ignored those calls, assuming she was reaching out in desperation, hoping to salvage something already shattered. But now, as he stared at the faces of his children, he realized the magnitude of his mistake. He glanced at the boys. The one on the left was staring at him, his expression guarded and suspicious. The other was more relaxed, his head tilted in curiosity. The little girl, however, clung to Mia's sleeve, her dark eyes flitting between her mother and the stranger who had disrupted their dinner. Ethan swallowed hard and turned back to Mia. Why didn't you try harder? Her eyes flashed. You think I didn't? You were untouchable, Ethan. Your assistant blocked me, your numbers changed, and even if I had gotten through, do you really think you would have listened? He hated that she was right, hated that he had been so consumed by his ambition that he had shut out everything else. But this wasn't something he could walk away from. I want to meet them, he said firmly. Mia's jaw tightened. This isn't just about what you want. They don't know you, Ethan. You can't just... They're mine. His voice was raw, edged with something close to desperation. I lost 3 years. I won't lose any more. Mia studied him, something unreadable flickering in her gaze. Then she sighed. Fine. Tomorrow at the park near my house at noon. With that, she turned back to the children, her expression softening as she ushered them toward the door. Ethan watched them go, his heart pounding with an unfamiliar mix of dread and longing. Tomorrow, he had until tomorrow to figure out how to be a father. The next day, Ethan stood at the entrance of the park, hands in his pockets, trying to steady the unfamiliar nerves twisting in his stomach. The park was bustling with activity, children running, parents chatting, the air filled with laughter. It was a world he had never belonged to, a world he had never thought he needed. Then he saw them. Mia was walking toward him, her steps measured and cautious. The children trailed beside her, each one reacting differently to the sight of him. The boy on the left, Nathan, as Mia had told him over the phone, had his arms crossed, his expression guarded. The other, Liam, was grinning, his excitement barely contained. And Emma, the smallest, kept close to Mia, her tiny hand clutching, her mother's fingers like a lifeline. Ethan swallowed hard and took a step forward. Hi, he said, feeling ridiculous for not knowing what else to say. Liam was the first to respond. Are you the guy from last night? Mia sighed. Liam, we talked about this. It's okay, Ethan murmured as he crouched slightly, trying to meet them at eye level. Yeah, I'm the guy from last night. Nathan narrowed his eyes. Who are you? The question sliced through him. He was their father, and yet to them he was no one. He hesitated, glancing at Mia for guidance, but she remained silent. He turned back to the children. I'm Ethan, and I'd really like to get to know you. Liam tilted his head as if to ask, Know us how? Ethan exhaled a small chuckle, though his chest felt painfully tight. Well, maybe we could start with playing. What do you guys like to do? Liam beamed. I like to race, but you can't. Catch me! With that, he took off, his small legs carrying him across the playground. Ethan looked at Nathan, but the boy only shrugged. He's fast, he said, unimpressed. Meanwhile, Emma stared at Ethan with wide eyes, then turned to Mia. Mommy, I'm thirsty. Mia gave Ethan a pointed look before reaching into her bag for a water bottle. She's shy, she said quietly. Give her time. Ethan nodded, his gaze flickering back to Nathan, who still watched him with silent skepticism. This was going to be harder than he thought. But as he saw Liam laughing on the monkey bars and Emma quietly sipping her water, something inside him shifted. Had spent his whole life fighting for things he thought mattered. Now he realized he had been fighting for all the wrong things. Over the next few days, Ethan made it his mission to spend time with the children. He showed up at the park every afternoon, and though Mia remained hesitant, she didn't stop him. Liam was the easiest to win over. The boy was fearless, always, dragging Ethan into some new adventure, whether it was climbing trees or playing tag. Liam embraced the idea of having Ethan around without hesitation. Emma was more reserved, but slowly she began warming up to him. She would sit beside him on a bench, listening as he read stories aloud, though she never spoke much. Nathan, however, was a different story. One evening, as Ethan walked them back to Mia's apartment, Nathan lagged behind, his face set in a stubborn scowl. What's on your mind, buddy? Ethan asked in a light tone. Nathan glared up at him. Are you going to leave? The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Why would you think that? Ethan asked carefully. Nathan shrugged, looking away. Because that's what people do. Ethan exhaled and crouched down so they were at eye level. Nathan, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere. The boy's expression didn't change. That's what my mom thought too. For the first time, Ethan truly understood the damage he had done and realized just how much he had to prove. The days stretched into a routine that Ethan had never anticipated but found himself unwilling to abandon. He showed up at the park every day. Sometimes Mia stayed, watching from a distance with her arms crossed in a stance of self-preservation rather than hostility. Other times, she left him alone with the children, an unspoken test of his resolve. Liam remained his biggest champion, eager to pull him into games or bombard him with questions. Emma, though still shy, began offering him small pieces of herself. A flower found on the grass, a whispered good night as he walked them home, a hesitant smile that felt like winning the lottery. Nathan, however, made him work for every inch. One afternoon, as Ethan attempted to teach Liam how to properly kick a soccer ball, Nathan stood off to the side, arms folded and scowling. Ethan ignored it for as long as he could, but eventually, he walked over. You don't like me very much, do you? He asked evenly. Nathan's glare was sharp. I don't trust you. Ethan nodded, expecting that answer. Fair enough, but I'd like the chance to change that. Nathan's jaw tightened. Why now? He asked. Ethan hesitated. There's no easy answer, because I was stupid. Before. Because I thought the things I was chasing mattered more than what I left behind, and because I can't change the past. But I want to be here now. Nathan didn't respond. He just studied Ethan with a depth far beyond his years before, finally muttering, We'll see. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That night, Ethan found himself sitting on a park bench with Mia. The children were asleep at home, and for the first time in years, they were alone. You're really trying, she admitted softly. Her voice was softer than he expected. He turned to her. I don't know how to be a father, Mia, but I want to be. She sighed, rubbing her hands together. It's not just about showing up, Ethan. It's about being consistent, about proving to them that you're here to stay. Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I know I screwed up. I know I don't deserve to just walk in and have everything fall into place, but I'm here. Mia hesitated before looking up at him. Why did you ignore me back then? Her tone was pained. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that if I let you in, if I let anything distract me, I'd lose everything I worked for." Mia studied. Him, her expression unreadable, and Ethan met her steady, unflinching gaze. "Now I realize that everything I worked for means nothing if I don't have them." For the first time, Mia's expression softened, though the walls around her heart were still there. He could see them, feel them, and he knew that breaking them down would take more than just words. The night was cold, the air thick with unspoken words. Ethan had just dropped the children off, and as he walked away, he heard the door open. "Ethan," came a soft voice from the doorway. Mia stood there, arms wrapped around herself. "Come inside." It wasn't merely an invitation, it was a challenge. He stepped through the threshold, and for the first time in 3 years, he was inside her home. It was warm, lived in, filled with small details that spoke of the life she had built without him. Pictures on the wall, toys scattered across the floor, a home that had no space for him until now. Mia walked to the kitchen and poured them both a cup of tea. "The kids are asleep," she said, sliding one cup toward him. Ethan took it, watching her carefully. "You don't have to do this." She exhaled. "Maybe I do." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their past hanging between them. Then finally, Mia looked at him. "Do you really think you can be their father?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I know I can." Mia held his gaze for a long time before finally nodding. And just like that, the game had changed. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan found himself adapting to a life he had never envisioned. Boardrooms and power plays had once defined him, but now his world revolved around 3 small, unpredictable forces of nature. He learned that Liam loved to talk about dinosaurs, outer space, and a million things in between, that Emma hated loud noises but adored bedtime stories, clinging to every word as though it were magic, and that Nathan, ever watchful, was still waiting for Ethan to prove himself. Progress came in inches, in tiny victories that felt monumental. The first time Emma let him carry her to the car, the first time Liam reached for his hand without hesitation, the first time Nathan didn't flinch when Ethan ruffled his hair. And yet, Mia remained his greatest challenge. One evening, as Ethan prepared to leave after spending time with the children, Mia stood by the door. "They're getting used to you," she said cautiously. He nodded. "That's the goal." She hesitated. "But I need to know something, Ethan. Are you here for them, or are you here to fix your own guilt?" The question hit him like a punch. He wanted to snap back and tell her she was being unfair, but the truth was he didn't have an answer that would satisfy her. "I'm here because I should have been from the start," he said finally. Mia searched his face for a long moment before nodding. "I hope that's true," she said, though something in her tone told him she wasn't convinced yet. Ethan had spent his life winning deals, winning negotiations, winning at the cost of everything else, but winning Nathan's trust was proving to be the hardest battle of all. One rainy afternoon, Ethan picked the kids up from school. Liam chattered excitedly about his day. Emma clung to his arm, but Nathan remained silent, staring out the window with a blank expression. As they reached Mia's apartment, Nathan finally spoke. "You left her." Ethan turned, startled. "What?" "You left my mom?" Nathan repeated, his voice steady but cold. "That's why I don't trust you." Ethan exhaled. "Nathan." The words hit him like a gut punch. Ethan had been so focused on his relationship with the children that he had ignored the scars he'd left on Mia. "I did, Ethan," he admitted softly, "and I regret it every day." Nathan finally looked at him, searching for something. Maybe a lie, maybe an excuse. "You better not do it again," he muttered before stepping out of the car. Ethan sat there for a long time after the door closed, realizing that his biggest Battle wasn't just proving himself to his children. It was proving himself to the woman he had broken. Everything had shattered on a Tuesday. Ethan had promised to take the kids to the aquarium after school. He had cleared his schedule, sworn to himself that nothing would come between them. But when a last-minute business emergency arose, Ethan found himself making a choice he had once considered simple: work. By the time he arrived at Mia's apartment, the disappointment was palpable. Liam sulked, Emma clung to Mia, and Nathan stared at him with a coldness that burned. "You said you'd be there," Nathan accused. "I know, buddy, don't call me that," Ethan replied. Nathan snapped, "You're just like before." Ethan felt the weight of his failure settle in his chest. "Nathan," Mia cut in. "Go home, Ethan." Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was worse. It was tired. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but Mia turned away, ushering the children inside. The door closed, and for the first time since it all began, Ethan felt the true weight of what he stood to lose. Sitting in his car outside Mia's apartment, Ethan stared at the closed door as the weight of his failure pressed against his chest, like a vice. He had spent weeks trying to prove that he had changed, that he was more than the man who once prioritized power over love. And in one missed moment, he had confirmed Mia's worst fear, that he was still the same. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant, a reminder of yet another meeting, another responsibility demanding his attention. But he ignored it. Instead, he stepped out of the car and walked back to the door. His knock was hesitant, uncertain. It took a long moment before Mia answered. She didn't look surprised to see him, but she didn't look pleased either. "Ethan," she sighed, "I need to fix this." Her voice was quiet, but firm. "I need to fix what I broke." Leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed, she said, "You can't just fix it, Ethan. This isn't a contract negotiation. You can't just say the right things and make it all go away." He swallowed hard. "Then tell me how to make it right." She studied him, her expression unreadable. "You can't keep making promises you won't keep, especially with the kids. Nathan, they need consistency. They need to know you won't disappear the moment things get complicated." Ethan nodded slowly. "I get that." Her eyes searched his. "Because if you really do, you'll stop trying to fix everything in one grand gesture and start proving yourself every single day." Her words hit him like a slap. He had always been a man of big moves and dramatic decisions, but this wasn't something he could fix with money or power. It was about showing up every day without fail. A weak, muffled cough interrupted them from inside. Mia's expression shifted, worry flickering across her face. What was that? Ethan frowned. Mia didn't answer. Instead, she pushed the door open and walked inside. Ethan followed. Nathan lay on the couch, his small body curled under a blanket, his face pale, his forehead damp with sweat. Liam and Emma sat nearby, unusually quiet. "He's been sick since last night," Mia murmured as she brushed Nathan's damp hair back. "It's just a fever, but he's been exhausted." All day, Ethan moved without thinking. He knelt beside the couch, his palm resting gently against Nathan's forehead. The boy stirred but didn't pull away. "I'll stay," Ethan said softly. "Whatever you need, however long it takes." Mia hesitated, her guard still up, but then she nodded. For the first time, Ethan felt he had taken a real step forward. The night stretched long and slow. Nathan's fever remained high, and Mia barely left his side. Ethan stayed too, fetching cold compresses, holding Emma when she got scared, making sure Liam was settled. Hours passed, and sometime near dawn, Nathan stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, and in the dim light of the living room, he looked at Ethan. "You're still here?" he murmured, his voice hoarse. Ethan swallowed hard. "I told you, buddy. I'm not going anywhere." Nathan studied him for a long moment before, with a small nod, closing his eyes again. By morning, the fever had broken. Nathan was still weak, but he was awake, and that alone felt like a victory. Mia made coffee, exhaustion lining her face, while Ethan sat across from her at the kitchen table, watching her stir her mug absently. "You really stayed," she murmured almost to herself. "I meant what I said," Ethan replied. "I'm here for them, and for you." Mia let out a small breath, rubbing her temples. "I don't know how to trust that, Ethan." He reached across the table, gently covering her hand with his own. "Then let me prove it every day for a long time." After a long silence, she finally looked at him and said softly, "Stay for breakfast." It wasn't a declaration of love, nor a promise of a second chance. It was a beginning, and this time, Ethan wouldn't waste it. Thank you for listening until the end. What did you think of this story? If you can, leave your feedback in the comments. It helps me improve and motivates me to keep sharing stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate the notification bell. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will also touch your heart. A big kiss, and see you in the next story.